Good morning. My name is David, and this morning I'd like to talk to you about grit. Firstly, I'm going to give you a definition of grit. Then I'm going to outline how grit can be measured. I'll then move on to some benefits of having grit. And finally, I'll talk about whether or not your level of grittiness can be improved. Firstly, what is the definition of grit? The idea of grit was popularised by the American academic Angela Duckworth in the early part of this century. She defines grit in this way. The key words here are passion, perseverance, and long-term goals. So grit is really just the determination to keep moving towards your goals, despite all the setbacks. Duckworth further divides grit into two sub-areas, perseverance and consistency of effort. An example of this is Roger Federer. Federer is arguably the greatest male tennis player who ever lived. Throughout his remarkable career, he has earned over 100 career titles, including 20 Grand Slams, and he is still playing. His persistence and consistency is remarkable. Now I'd like to talk about how grit can be measured. Duckworth uses a self-assessment inventory that asks participants to respond to prompts using a modified Likert scale. For example, for questions related to perseverance like this, participants respond by selecting the response closest to how they see themselves. There is a similar set of questions for consistency. Anyone can go to Duckworth's website and take a free sample of the test. I've done that, and here is my score. You can see that I got a grit score of 4.2, and hence I have more grit than about 80% of all Americans. I'd now like to move on and discuss one of the benefits of having grit. This is a chart from Duckworth's research into grit and academic achievement. On the vertical axis, you can see a measure of grit, and on the horizontal axis, you can see the highest level of academic achievement. Even with relatively low levels of grit, students can complete high school. However, at the level of academic achievement increases through college degrees to postgraduate degrees, very high levels of grit are required to be successful. This is not surprising. Completing a PhD requires tremendous effort over a long period of time, the very essence of grit. Finally, I'd like to briefly discuss whether or not grit can be learned. This is data from a study by Rimfeld and others. I'd like to focus on just the key parts of this for our purposes. Here we can see the two traits of perseverance and consistency of effort. The column on the left describes how 1/5 to 1/3 of our grit is inherited, and there's nothing we can do about that. However, the good news is that the column on the right shows that between 2/3 and 3/4 of our grit is under our control, so grit can be learned, which is good news for those of us that don't have very much of it. I'll leave the last word to Roger Federer. Thank you. Here are my references, and thank you very much.